Although the VLOOKUPs and HLOOKUPs are fantastic in their own right and they do a great job, they do tend to fall over if there is no match for the data that you're trying to look up. If we take the VLOOKUP error file, we have a sales sheet that is taking the client ID here, looking it up and returning the client name, the client's town and the client's department. Now the clients are all drawn from the second sheet of clients. Now what happens if we enter an ID for a client that does not exist? So say for example ID 200. Then we're hit with these awful Excel #NA because there is nothing to look up, so it's not applicable. You get an NA result. Now we can negate that and return much nicer error messages by catching the chance of it being not applicable. So if we go back to the first formula in the sheet, because this is the one we need to affect before we then replicate, what we're going to do is we're going to change this so that before it actually carries out the lookup, it checks to see if it is NA. So equals if, open brackets. There is then a nice function called isNA. You can see that appears in the list. Open brackets. Now isNA is going to check if what I'm about to do returns NA. Well, what I'm going to check is the VLOOKUP. So I'm actually going to copy all of that formula by highlighting within the formula itself and then Control-C to copy. Then I can close the isNA. Again, the color coding of the brackets is really helping out here. Purple brackets are the VLOOKUP, isNA brackets are the red ones. So that's my if clause. Now isNA will return a true or a false. So if isNA, so if true, I fall into this section, which means that the VLOOKUP has returned an NA. Well, if that's the case, I don't want #NA to appear on the screen. I would like a much more human and explanatory message, and that could just be wrong ID. In speech marks, so the literal value gets typed out on the screen. So wrong ID will appear on the screen. Then comma, and I'm into the false section of the if. Well, this is now what will happen if we are not an NA. Well, if we're not an NA, then it's found a value. Therefore, I would like it to carry out the VLOOKUP. So I paste back in the formula that I already copied. Control-V, or right-click and paste will suffice. And it pastes me in the VLOOKUP with red brackets, so I can see the start and the end of the VLOOKUP, and then closed brackets for my if. So those are black ones. So the first isNA are red brackets, then purple for the VLOOKUP. The second VLOOKUP has red brackets, and then the black ones are the start and the end of the if statement. When I press return, nothing should look any different until I enter an ID number that does not exist. So how about 999? Does not exist, so I get wrong ID rather than #NA. Now in the client town, I need to do exactly the same thing. What I might do though is I might generate a different error message. There's no point in having wrong ID 3 times across the screen. So let's copy the formula, ready to repeat it. Equals if, open brackets, isNA, open brackets, end of the VLOOKUP, close brackets, comma. Now this time, if it's actually NA, I'm not going to put wrong ID again because it will already say that in the client name. I'm just going to put a little hyphen. So I'm not going to have a #NA, I'm just going to have a little hyphen because the error message effectively has already been given to them in the client name column. Comma. However, if it's false, so it's not an NA problem, then I can do my VLOOKUP. So let's paste back in the formula again and close the if statement. And you see we get a little hyphen sign. And we can do exactly the same for department. Copy the formula. Let's do this, right click this time. Equals if isNA, open brackets, close brackets after the VLOOKUP. Again, this time I'm going to put out the little hyphen, comma, or do the formula. Close round brackets for the if, return. So I get a little hyphen, but the first field they see, which is the client name, says wrong ID. Making sure that it works with the correct ID, put a 6. I get the person's name, their town, and their sales department. All 3 of those now have the ifs attached to them. Those are the formulas that then need replicating down the sheet. And when we actually have a wrong ID of 200, we get told wrong ID, then 2 little hyphens for the rest, rather than it looking as untidy as it did when we had the generic Excel error message of #NA. So that's just capturing the fact that what you're trying to look up does not exist in your lookup table.